Good afternoon. My name is Nyama Sophia Sandy. I am a curator, anthropologist, multidisciplinary artist, and educator. Welcome to Harnessing History, Tracing the Legacy of the Lyons Family, a three-part digital convening celebrating the Lyons family, hosted by me and the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs. Harnessing History centers on the Lyons family, a Black family who lived in New York City in the 19th century and explores the legacy and history of their activism in New York City and beyond. The convening will consist of 3 conversations inviting artists, scholars, community activists, and more to reflect on the Lyons family's commitment to justice, civic, and political engagement. Each conversation seeks to connect an element of the Lyons story and tease out the family legacy within the context of the art and history of the contemporary moment. This series is part of DCLA's Public Art as Community Engagements program and is organized by Grooveworks, founded and led by yours truly. It is funded by the Ford Foundation, the JPB Foundation, the Mellon Foundation, and the Lori M. Tisch Illumination Fund, with support from the Mayor's Fund for the Advancement of New York City. Technical support is provided for this entire series by the amazing team at Afterglow Productions. This conversation is being recorded. Closed captions are enabled for those with accessibility needs. A transcript and video from all 3 conversations will soon be available on the DCLA website. For multiple generations, the Lyons family was engaged in resistance work. From Albro and Maria's participation in the Underground Railroad, their leadership in the fight to desegregate schools in Providence, Rhode Island in the 1860s, at the time when such an idea was unheard of, to Marisha's work as an anti-lynching and women's suffrage activist in New York in the 19th and early part of the 20th century. Marisha was particularly prolific in her solution-based engagement with the issues of her time. In the 1890s, she co-founded the White Rose Mission, which supported Black women migrants arriving from the American South and the Caribbean with housing, food, and connections to employment and education opportunities. The mission operated in Upper Manhattan until 1984, which is a really incredible thing to think about and consider. Resistance as cultural praxis, our third and final conversation will tap into the work of artists, organizers, and cultural practitioners Helena Metafaria, Jordan Seabury, and Attila Springer at the crossroads of community and cultural organizing and political engagement toward the creation of transformation and justice. I'm so thrilled to have each of them here with us today. I will be introducing our first speaker, Helena Metafaria. Helena Metafaria is an interdisciplinary artist working across collage, assemblage, video, performance, and social engagement. Her work integrates the archive, somatic studies, and dialogical practices, narrating undertold stories that amplify BIPOC and femme bodies. Recent solo exhibitions include the Museum of Fine Arts Boston this year, New York University's Gallatin Galleries, Michigan State University's Scene Metro Space in East Lansing, Michigan, the Museum of African Diaspora in San Francisco. She will present her work at the 2023 Sharjah Biennial in the United Arab Emirates. Metafaria's work is in the permanent collections of several institutions, including the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, and the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture here in New York City. Metafaria received her MFA from Tufts University School of Museum of Fine Arts and attended the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. Her work has been supported by residencies, including the MacDowell, Yaddo, Bemis Center for Contemporary Art, and Silver Art projects at the World Trade Center. Her work has been written about in publications including the New York Times, Financial Times, the Washington Post, Hyperallergic, Art News, and the Art Newspaper. Helena currently serves as the assistant professor of visual art at Brown University, and she lives and works in New York City. Thank you so much, Helena, for being here with us. I will leave you to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this warm introduction, Nyama, and I'm so glad to be able to present on my work. I want to share a project I think is relative to the Lyons family and their attention towards archives. Next slide. By Way of Revolution is a project I've been working on since 2018. It is grounded in archival research, mostly research found and sourced through libraries that focus on radicalism. So every major university has a library, and some of them include a special collection that has to do with what is deemed as radical. I'm also working with the bodies of people in various communities around the nation, focusing on BIPOC women, or those who identify as BIPOC women, so cis and trans. And so I engage with them in workshops, primarily workshops that deal with somatic movement and protest as a form of performance, but also as a spectacle that garners attention, that helps to shift policy and build awareness in community, and a way to provide a ripple effect that can produce change. So after these workshops, I photograph the participants of the workshops, and with their collaboration, look at the researches that inform their ability to take up space, and take up space largely in institutional spaces, but around in every site. And so next slide. These are some of the collages from that series. This was a still from a performance at, a workshop and collaboration with Museum of Fine Arts Boston for my recent solo show there. Next slide. I also work with those who identify as activists on the front line. And so this is Erin Maya from the Resistance Survival Chorus. Next slide. Asia Monet from the Wide Awakes community. I've worked with BLM founders and chapter leaders. And so it's a way to adorn those who are on the front line, but also who are everyday folks that make up protests. Next slide. Again, working with students, and some of the archives that I work with are Black Panther newspapers. I also work with different civil rights photographs. I'm looking at generations of change that inform women. And I'm also looking at women's stories, because those are often the undertold, underdocumented stories that we don't always hear about or see archived across generations. Next slide. Some of these projects have also turned into public facing, so they're not always just for the galleries or for the museums. They are public art pieces. So this is a billboard that exists in the Bronx. Next slide. And a vinyl reproduction of my mural as a mural, vinyl reproduction of my collage that exists at Dream Yard Projects in the Bronx. Next slide. I'm also working with oral histories, not just archival histories that are found within libraries. So I'm interested in the power of the voice, the power of storytelling amongst women intergenerationally. And so in a video that's part of this project, I am working with the descendants of civil rights leaders, Frederick Douglass's descendants. Melania and Shara Douglass are on the left of this photograph. Dick Gregory's daughter, Ayanna Gregory, center. And then I have James Baldwin's sister, Ms. Paula Whaley, on the right. And so they are all engaged in conversation through a 17-minute video, a performance that goes into 17 minutes as a video cut, talking about the matriarchs in their families, not just the esteemed patriarchs who received a lot of the attention in abolition movements and civil rights movements. And so they're telling the undertold stories of the women in their family, but also their own sort of across generations, their own vision for contemporary justice and social justice in this day and age. Next slide. The performance takes also place in Fells Point, which is one of the oldest slave ports in the country. It also is an offering of song, it's an offering of story sharing. And this video is actually currently on view at the UB Blake Center in Baltimore, and it will be at the Sharjah Biennial. Next slide. Another dimension to my practice, because I work very interdisciplinary across different visual and performance art forms, is sculpture. So in this particular sculpture, I'm using the archives as etching on brass to make a physical crown. Next slide. And with that crown, I'm engaging in performance. In this particular performance, The Willing, I tell the stories of 5 generations of women in my family. So my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother, who are all deceased and who were all activists in their own rights across in Ethiopia and also in the US during the civil rights movement. myself, and then I engage with my niece, who's pictured in this photograph, to tell her story. And so this idea of the passing of the crown, the passing of the legacy, the passing of the story becomes part of this work. Next slide. In the same performance, I activate a lot of the materials that I work with. So I work with image-based, research-based work, but I also work with text. Next slide. The texts that I work with in protest signs are crowdsourced. So I do this project called The Woke that's across the country. It's part of the By Way of Revolution series, where I ask people to offer through a QR code or a written note card what is their everyday revolution, something on a micro or macro scale. They contribute this, and I have about 1,000 responses from places like Alabama and California and Massachusetts, et cetera. And so I take some of these and I make them into protest signs that are able to be downloaded as well. And so there's this ability to have a sign. If you contribute your thoughts, you can receive someone else's thoughts and use them directly in protests. So this becomes a theatrical sort of crowd without a crowd sort of installation. Next slide. What I love is when these protest signs get activated. So when I erected this installation a week later, it was for my solo show at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. The curators went on a union strike. And so they were able to they asked me if they could download and use some of my signs along with their signs. And I thought that was exactly what I wanted. I never want my work to be symbolic. I'm always thinking about tools for activation. And so they have finally received their union like in many months later. But I love the fact that this work became a part of that story about institutional critique, and also thinking about the ways in which fair wage also help women, help BIPOC folk enter these spaces. Next slide. And I think this might be the final slide, if I'm not mistaken. This is the ways in which people have contributed to this project. So it comes in the form of filling out a note card, and then they may receive a button with somebody else's slides, and they also, with somebody else's prompts, somebody else's responses, and then they also can download a protest sign. So that's just an overview of my project By Way of Revolution.
Thank you so much, Helena. So appreciate you sharing. Next, I'm thrilled to introduce Jordan Seabury. Jordan Seabury is a painter, organizer, legislative advocate, and educator. Born and raised on the South Side of Chicago, Jordan first came to Providence to attend Rhode Island School of Design. Alongside his art, he built a career as a grassroots organizer, helping to fight and pass multiple criminal justice reform milestones, including probation reform, the Unshackling Pregnant Prisoners Bill, and laying the groundwork for the Ban the Box movement in Rhode Island. Jordan serves as the co-director of the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture, a people-powered nonprofit agency, and most recently worked as the director of public policy at the Nonviolence Institute. He serves as the chairman of the Providence Board of Canvassers, overseeing the city's elections, as a board member of the New Urban Arts in Providence, and as a board member of Protect Families First, working on community-oriented drug policy reform. He has received fellowships from the Art Matters Foundation, the Rhode Island Foundation, and recently served as a community leader fellow at Roger Williams University School of Law. Jordan maintains a painting studio in Providence and has displayed works at institutions including the RISD Museum, the Cordova Museum, Crystal Bridges Museum, the Boston Center for the Arts, and exhibition spaces in New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, and elsewhere. Thank you so much, Jordan. I will leave you to it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nayama. And thanks, of course, to everybody watching and listening with us. I want to consider for a second something that the artist Becky Davis taught me, which is to consider that we know that matter can neither be created nor destroyed, which is really another way of saying that the matter that we have today is the matter that we will have, and the matter that we always have had. As in, the embers of the fire that swallowed countless homes like my grandfather's are still here. the particles of smoke, the carbon dioxide, monoxide, the soot, everything, all of it is still in our atmosphere, under our feet. The carbon monoxide from those fires fed trees that I love to climb, that may have built homes or laid railways. Even tougher for me than understanding the sheer fact that every particle that made that fire is still here is remembering that every droplet of water that put it out is also still with us. And this is what Becky reminds me of. She talks about the water cycle, gas, water, ice, where it constantly refreshes. It reminds us that the water that I'm drinking is the water that a stegosaurus drank. It's the same water that passes through my body before passing through yours. It's the water that has always been on this planet and always will be on this planet. All of that to me means something simple that we maybe know intrinsically, which is for every fire that the future holds, every drop of water to put those fires out is already here. Not only is it here on the planet, it's passing through me, it's passing through you, it's passing through a sunflower and a cloud and my chihuahua upstairs. Every drop that we need is already with us. That is what I think artists are here to do. We know the fires of the future will be fought with the water that we have today. Artists are here to bring those tools to light, to name them, to depict them, and most importantly, to hand them to one another. So my life now is spent thinking through those spaces where those histories smash together and some of those tools for the future start to get seen. So I'll talk about a couple projects that start to inch toward that. The slide here is from a series of drawings that I made and exhibited recently this year inside of and about the Noxubee County Library, which is just outside the town that my grandfather was raised in. And had my grandfather not fled the Ku Klux Klan in his Mississippi town, this library would have been a place that he knew, but very differently. It was built in 1901, 15 years before he was born, to be the Noxubee County Jail. Almost 80 years later, a few years before I was born, it was transformed into the Noxubee County Library. They didn't raise enough money. They got together and were able to transform it into a library, but not to remove any of the jail stuff. So what carried through that century are the bars. It exists now as a surreal space, a literalized picket sign. And so for me, entering the space to get to the fiction section, you have to move the heavy metal doors. You have to swing the gates open to get to nonfiction. The gallows still function. Children study in this library under the executioner's hook, under the trap doors that fall and take a person's life. That is where a nursing student studies their textbooks. And so for me, drawing is a way of listening, of understanding a space. And this exhibit, this series of drawings was a way for me to just begin a relationship with this space where history is colliding. And we can hop to the next slide. And this is another example of thinking about how those histories compress. This is from an exhibition I had with Steven Zavidas Gallery in Boston called But Mostly We Waited for Spring When There Could Be Gardens, where each of these paintings, large watercolor and graphite primarily paintings, are taking as compositional jumping off points photographs from the Works Progress Administration, compressing that with contemporary figures and trying to understand the governmental role in supporting artists at the grassroots level, directly supporting communities, which leads directly into the last project I'll talk about, if you can hop to the next slide, which is the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture. This is, I guess you could call my day job, but it's really more, I think of it like a performance piece. I came up in political circles as an anarchist, thinking about ways to achieve full autonomy, full self-determination in absence of the state. And so in this project, we are performing the state. We are naming ourselves the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture because the federal government never made a U.S. Department of Arts and Culture. And in that same anarchist tradition, because where government fails, we do for ourselves and community. The only reason we're able to use this name is because the government never made one. So I like to joke that I'm always waiting for my cease and desist letter from Joe Biden, because he decided to finally make one. And when he does, he will inherit all of these great projects, these partnerships, this history that will remain in the department. If you hop to the next slide, I'll talk about some of that work. So I already mentioned my painting series around the Works Progress Administration. This work is tied in there as well. We understood that legacy of the government supporting grassroots artists directly, and we wanted to model a new way for municipalities and organizations to do that. So we created a People's WPA. If you hop to the next slide, you'll see some of the cohort. We picked some of the most exemplary cultural organizing projects all across the country, every corner of the US, to directly support, build a cohort, build that connective tissue across geography and sector, to be able to model what it could look like if we actually did come together and were able to build this movement of grassroots artists who are doing this incredible cultural organizing work, but disconnected by geography. You can hop to the next slide. I'll move through these a little bit quicker. Another thing that we do at the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture, we wanted to lean in on climate work. And so we started our Artists Unite for a Green New Deal series, where we're trying to host what we would call de-wonkification briefings. So trying to translate the Green New Deal language and movement language for artists to plug directly into movement. So not only are we interested in preparing artists to join social justice work, we also want to support movement organizations to receive artists. So artists aren't just doing poster projects or cooler picket signs, but that their creativity is actually imbued in every level of that movement work, because artists are plugged into that at every level. I'm going to skip a couple slides. I think Nyama's, I feel like I might hear my exit music, so I'm going to hop one more slide. One more slide. Man, I had too many slides. Okay, I'll end here, Nyama. I promise, 2 seconds. I just always try to end with the people who make this work inspiring and nourishing for me. These are from a photo series that I've been doing down in that same town that my grandfather was chased out of, going back down and finding that land and building relationships year after year with the folks who live there and who make that community so important to the past that I imagine and the present that I'm trying to compress all together. So I appreciate that. We'll have some more chance to talk. Sorry for taking up too much time, Nyama.
It's fine. I appreciate you greatly. Thank you so much, Jordan. And we'll see you in a few minutes. I'm so thrilled to introduce Attila Springer. Attila Springer is a Trinidad-born writer, communications professional, and cultural worker with an interest in the intersections between culture, memory, festival arts, and social justice. A 2021 United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, People of African Descent Fellow, Ms. Springer channels over 20 years of experience in culture and communications work to help facilitate movement and awareness building for grassroots and community projects with a specific focus on Caribbean festival arts, preservation, and recognition of African spiritual traditions, using these forums as a way to confront social justice issues among women and young people of African descent. She's a founding member of the United Maroon Indigenous Peoples and executive director of the Cambule Movement Performing Arts Company. Attila, I'm just going to leave that there right now. I'm so grateful that you're here with us, and I will leave you to sharing your work with us. Thank you so much.
Give thanks, give thanks. Thank you so much, Nyama, for having me. Good afternoon to all of my friends, allies, and elders. I just want to say I'm really humbled and honored to be here, and I give thanks to Nyama for giving me the opportunity to speak on resistance as cultural practice in the Trinidad Carnival. Next slide, please. So I start with my great-grandfather, Jim P. the Garifuna man from St. Vincent. And I salute all of my direct ancestors and the ancestors of my community. So we're talking about people like Claudia Jones and Kwame Ture and Maurice Bishop, and I could call names and call names and call names, but that's not what I'm here to do. They are always with me. I was very struck by the story of the Lyons family and the efforts to endure their memory in the consciousness of New York City. And I only realized very recently that I come from a place of privilege growing up in a house of storytellers. Next slide. Both my mother and father are writers, poets, performers who found each other during the 1970 Black Power uprising in Trinidad. They used poetry, theater, kaiso, and mass to drive home the ideas of revolution, and to this day are still engaged in this work of cultural transformation for the ongoing effort of the liberation of Blackness from a variety of economic, social, and spiritual shackles. And so much of the scholarship that I've read about inheritances of enslavement speak at length about how the traumas of enslavement have lingered in our minds and our bodies, in the ways we discipline our children, in the fractured and fraught matters of love between Black men and women, in the ways we cleave to the Christian Bible because the idea of God being Black like us is far too wild and imagining. So we speak less on how we inherit legacies of resistance. And so in reflecting on the legacies of Albert and Mary Lyons passed on to Maritza, I reflect on what I inherited from my generations, the ideas of resistance, the idea of standing up, the idea of using our songs and stories as key tools in the fight to dismantle racism, culture, colorism, and spiritual erasure. Some people get a house, some people get generational wealth, others get high blood pressure. I got troublemaking from both sides. And at the crossroads, Eshu is constantly showing me the path back to liberation with music, stories, songs, rituals, masking as the keys. Next slide. Some of us choose this work because it is what calls to us in our blood. So I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, and what you know about Trinidad and Tobago Carnival doesn't look like this slide that I have up here, which is of the Carnival Monday morning, 1 week before the first quote unquote riot of the Black Power movement began. And this is a Juve band that was called the Truth of Africa. And this was a practice run for what happened a week later. Next slide, please. And I just want to show you my, that tall guy in the back there with the afro is my father. So I'm showing you that not only did I inherit resistance, but I also inherited extreme coolness and precise afro and clothes in place, because the revolution is also a beautiful thing. So what we inherited about what Carnival looks like the next slide. This is what we see of Carnival today. This is what our leaders market as what Carnival is, but this is not what I know of Carnival. What I know of Carnival is Juve morning at the front of Desperados band with my father. Desperados, the steel band that began in the yard of an Orisha woman by the name of Matola. That is what I know of Carnival. Carnival was another time of the year to articulate and amplify what we lived all year round. Next slide, please. This quote from Claudia Jones, the Trinidad-born visionary, has guided me through most of my adult life in protest as a writer and community organizer. Claudia Jones put together the first Trinidad-style carnival in London in 1959, the proceeds of which paid the legal fees for a number of Caribbean migrants who were charged for taking part in the race riots. Next slide. The idea itself, this idea of a people's art as a genesis of their freedom was drummed into my head pretty much from birth. I got into the family business of culture as protest from an early age. Again, mentioning Desperados and Matola, my mother who used to bribe the police so that she could set up a stick fight in Gael on the corner of the library when she was running the West Indian Reference Library. Next slide, please. In 2004, our family company, Ida Cater, named for the women in my family, began performing a ritual reenactment of the 1881 Camberley riots. This incident is considered a pivotal moment in the Trinidad Carnival when the newly emancipated Africans confronted a racist colonial oppression and carved a space for themselves in the streets. Next slide. So from a 15-minute production, it has grown to a signature event for the carnival, a public ritual to open the weekend of festivities. So what happened during the pandemic is that we were forced to innovate. And so in 2021, in the absence of a celebration, we created a documentary. And this carnival, a week of performances and workshops to keep within the restrictions. So just a little bit about what Camboulay means and why we have changed the name from CANBOULAY to KAMBULE. So Camboulay, the burning of the canes. And this is what is at the root of why Carnival means so much to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, although it does not really make it into the tourism brochures. Next slide, please. So despite the challenges of doing street theater, the ongoing governmental lack of interest in culture, Camboulay endures to do the kind of active political engagement that can only come from confrontation of one's history, culture, and rituals. We've had to introduce barricades because members of the audience have become so drawn into the story that they have joined the fight at the end to beat the police. So we actually reenact through ritual the beating of the police by the people of Port of Spain, right? Today, Camboulay is the only place in the carnival where you can see depictions of some of the aspects of African spirituality that inform the ideas and visuals we still love about the carnival. We have a cast of over 100, many of whom are working class performers who practice their craft once a year. We have had young men who've joined us through their parents' concern for their colorism, their parents' concern for their involvement in gang behavior. And we also have women who have coming from abusive relationships. Naima, see her come up there. So, so we could get into the conversation a little bit more, but I just wanted to thank you again for the opportunity and say that, you know, this is a really powerful and wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much. We're going to keep it going. So I'm going to invite everyone back. So, you know, if you watch these things that I do, I often have like these tearful moments. Most of it has been off camera. Can't promise that's going to be the case today. Thank you all so much. I'm so thrilled to have you again. And I'm really thinking and was really listening carefully to what you offered. And I feel like something that I'm hearing, of course, I sent you all the questions. If you could unmute yourselves also. I sent you all these questions, but you know, for me, these things are really important to have an organic conversation and for us to be listening and responding to each other. So as such, so much of what each of you shared had me thinking about this idea of inheritance in the context of, you know, where we find ourselves, not just in this country, but globally as a diaspora, but also as a political organism of human beings, right? And so I wondered about what you might think about that. Obviously, that's super broad, and I want to leave it broad. So whoever would like to jump in may. Maybe you, Jordan, since you're pointing back at yourself.
I can't go first. I can't go first.
That
I
feels
would say, I don't want to like call on anybody, but I will say, Attila, my mind was spinning about inheritance when you were talking. So your choice, but
Yeah, sometimes you don't have a choice, eh? You don't have a choice. You know, I think that, you know, in my early days, I tried to run from what was calling me. But I always found myself coming back to some kind of protest. And so, you know, like, you know, I was very much involved in a lot of environmental protests. And as part of those environmental protests, we would do a lot of carnival and festival centric protests. So for example, they were trying to build an aluminum smelter in a community in South Trinidad. And so we took our protests to the Juve that was happening in Point Fortin. And when the news report came out, it said there were 200 smelter protesters in Juve, when it was like really about 10 of us. But, you know, just the impact and the fact that we melded ourselves into something that was so much a part of the cultural landscape, and we were able to engage people and have conversation and explain to them what our position was. You know, it was really, really powerful. So it's not just, you know, a random bunch of people trying to get the attention of the society, but going where the people are and engaging with the people's language is always the most powerful way to do it. So yeah, couldn't get away.
I totally forgot to mention that my Biowave Revolution series was informed and began because of my mother, who passed in 2016. I don't know why, that just like totally, it's the whole through line of the work and all of our work. She was an Ethiopian women's rights activist, and when she passed, it was right around the time of the Trump election, right before the Trump election, and BLM was starting, Black Lives Matter was starting to pick up. And I was thinking a lot about legacy. And so I wanted to uphold other women activists, because I was thinking about what happens to the women and how their labor is documented or underdocumented. And so this idea of inheritance, I think that's part of my inheritance, is like this sort of passing of the baton. I don't feel myself as a frontline worker in the same way that my mother was on behalf of Ethiopian women's rights issues as an expat living in the US, but I do feel like the idea to amplify other activists is at the center of my practice. And I see that as a through line. I think all of us are kind of grappling with how to make sense of these stories we've inherited and how to sort of bring art into this at the forefront of that storytelling.
yeah, I think I'm glad I didn't go first. I think for me, specifically from like an organizing perspective, it's always really challenging. There are a ton of folks who show up on a scene and want to start a new project or have a great idea that they want to, you know, start a new nonprofit or even just start a new sort of collective. And it's always been really important to me as a principal to understand the work that came before and wherever possible plug into organizing practices that are already happening in your place. You move to a new town and you like, it's actually really important to me that you understand what that landscape is to plug into it. And I think that's sort of mirrored in art as well for me, that I'm really not interested in a practice that is about the individual locked in their studio, who has like, you know, perfect inspiration that just materializes. I'm much more interested in sampling from pieces that have come before, from artists that I consider myself in conversation with, to be pulling compositional elements and figures and really building a tapestry and understanding my own place within it. There's something really bizarrely Western about the idea of total originality and novelty and constant newness that is about making money and about commodifying things. And so for me, understanding inheritance is actually an anti-capitalist creative practice.
What a perfect segue. Thank you. Helena, and you spoke a little about By Way of Revolution just a moment ago, but I want to ask a specific question about your choice to adorn the women's bodies in the way that you do. And I was hoping you could share about that with us.
Yeah, I think about ways in which Black women, women of color, we uphold ourselves in the face of white supremacy and patriarchy and all the other systemic oppressions that come our way. And there is something about reclaiming image, reclaiming our bodies from ways in which it's been extracted from or exploited or degraded. And I think about that in terms of the archive, ways in which the Black Panther Party, for example, you know, basically reclaimed their image when the media was sort of painting them, vilifying them, for example, or how current contemporary movements such as the Black Lives Matter movement use social media, or the Me Too movement use the image-based resources that we have to sort of reclaim or to sort of point attention towards a cause. And so there's this like kind of like interwoven histories of using the wearable or the sort of the optics as a platform for interrogation and spectacle that can amplify sort of other issues beyond the self. And so there's also this idea of esteem and pride. And so I'm thinking and interweaving all of those ideas when I think about headpieces, the head being a place where information sort of carries, but it's also a place of affirming beliefs. And so this idea of a headdress being a place throughout cultures, throughout our societies, they've always been a way to point power and positionality. And so these are some things I'm kind of grappling with the studio as I think about adornment, and the generosity of adorning people in my community or people around me. I feel is a way in which I've received generosity in so many ways from other women. And so it's like paying it forward.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Attila, you've offered us so much important context around Carnival, around the specificities of that 1970 rebellion. And I wonder for you how that connects to your work lifting up Maroon communities across the Caribbean.
Yeah, I don't see the two things as separate, you know. A few years ago, I did a paper for a conference in Haiti on Caribbean futures. And it was a declaration of Marronage, which was riffing off of this, you know, human rights, the Declaration of Human Rights. And within that declaration, there were so many points at which there was, you know, the whole question of ownership of space, ownership of body, ownership of ritual. And, you know, I think that Carnival is a place where we attempt to reclaim a lot of those things, especially in terms of the question of reparations, in terms of the question of emancipation. And if we look at the mass that comes out of that J'ouvert experience, J'ouvert is a mass of Marronage, you know, it is a mass of acknowledging the horrors of enslavement. It is a mass of the anonymity of the spirits of the enslaved that, you know, like, for example, Ijab Malassi, who who is the spirit of an ancestor who fell into a vat of molasses and, you know, lost their life or lost a limb, etc., etc. And that person being able to come back out into the carnival and reclaim that space and remind people that they existed. But it is also the mass of the person who escaped and want to come and celebrate as well. So the person who comes down from the hills, you know, at some point, part of my carnival ritual was to go into the bush on Saturday and Sunday and, you know, just ground myself in the bush, ground myself in nature. And so much of what we see within the Juve process is about nature. And I mean, if we connect it again spiritually to Ogun, who is the owner of the road, but also the hunter, also the master of creativity and technology. So you see the connection between the steel pan, which has to be created as a weapon to help his people deal with the challenges that are being faced still. But Ogun has to be you know, you have to go and find Ogun in the bush in order to lure him out to fight on your behalf. And so that idea of the maroon in the bush, plotting, working on the medicine, figuring out what is the next step, setting up community, setting up alternative ways of organizing finances, setting up all of those alternative spaces away from town. I think those two things exist hand in hand in the carnival space. And I'm certainly very excited about how principles of maroonage then get applied to people who are trying to hold on to those traditions and those rituals that are being sidelined by the commercialization, the commodification of the carnival, and making it into this thing that is belonged to by bodies that are light-skinned and you know, upper middle class.
Thank you. Brilliant. Jordan. So your work both as an artist and an organizer is super poignant and powerful. Clearly, from what you shared about the work the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture is doing, beauty is wielded as a tool in that work. And I wonder about the poeticism in that for you personally and how you understand it in all of your work across disciplines.
I think the role of beauty and poetry for me builds a credibility of vision that a movement needs. I think specifically for the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture work, it's about inviting folks in with a radical imagination, being able to create a vision of a future that they have a part in, that they're invited to, that they feel welcomed in. But also it's about creating this credible vision, right? It's always easier for folks to stay home, stay warm, stay comfortable. Getting involved in movement, you know, there are very few Attila shooting stars who are just like, I have to be at this protest. Most folks, most of the time, organizing requires a really deep conversation and listening posture where you're able to understand the challenges in folks' day-to-day lives that have either prevented them physically, but sometimes psychically, from engaging in movement, engaging in understanding that future actually involves them, and that movement can materially change people's lives and it can improve people's conditions, but that also it ushers in a future where people feel whole, people feel like they belong. And that, like, the role of beauty in that project is paramount for me. That is, when folks see and engage with and understand something beautiful, when folks see Helena's pieces and understand them as objects that contain just incredible amounts of beauty, they're automatically invited into the conversation that the piece is trying to have with them. It allows folks entry into a vision of a future that has credibility and invites them. And so for me, it's totally impossible to separate them. Like, beauty is tactical intervention, beauty is strategy, and also beauty is the human right that allows folks to see themselves in the future. It's all tied together, woven together, painted together, sculpted together. It's all in there.
Collaged, if you will.
A lot. I didn't think, yeah.
So alas, final call for Q&A from our audience. Please pop those questions into the Q&A box on the bottom right hand of your screen. And if not, I am prepared, so it's okay. Just in order of who spoke last. Helena, in this political climate where we find ourselves in this moment of midterm elections, it's just like the sort of unbearable like situations from, there's just so much. I won't even get too specific. How do you see by way of revolution shifting, if you do at all? Do you feel a need for it to be responsive in a particular way?
Yeah, thank you. The seed for this that project came to me around 2016, and I started working on it more diligently around 2018. And I usually work on projects for a couple years, like 2 to 3 years, and then I find its completion. This project, I have not found its completion, and I wonder if it's because of the way the politics and the climate in the world has gone, but also the need for this kind of conversation, this work to enter different communities and spaces in the ways that it has, whether it's institutional spaces. There's a project at the RISD Museum that's currently up with university students, et cetera, or in communities that are maybe working directly with activist communities, and as I've done in New York and Los Angeles. And I think that having an outlet for conversation is part of the reason that I make the work. It provides, as Jordan was saying, it provides like a center point or focal point or entry point to having some sort of like more challenging, nuanced conversations that are particular to a time. But in a way, I'm also trying to tap into what's timeless, which is that these issues are always going to be, until we eradicate systemic oppression and patriarchy and white supremacy, these things are always going to be timely. And that's kind of the unfortunate aspect to what the work is uncovering. And so I will continue to make the work until I quote unquote feel full. That's when I feel like a project is done, or when I've like eaten enough, like I'm like, okay, this is enough food, this is enough intake, this is enough. But I haven't felt full with this project. And I think it's because the liberation aspect, the freedom aspect, the revolution aspect hasn't been fulfilled. And so therefore I will continue to make the work.
Thank you. And actually, as you were speaking, a second sort of corollary question popped up for me. I'm wondering about whether you've thought about like moving these conversations into other countries as well. Obviously, you're Ethiopian. That is a significant arena of in the contemporary moment, political conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I've kept it pretty open from a diasporic perspective. Nationally, I focus on BIPOC issues. So I've worked with folks of different ethnicities, Chinese American, Japanese American histories within the US, deeply along research assistance and in collaboration with the participants, Navajo histories, et cetera. I've recently been in conversation with Aziz Fine Art, my gallery in London, about thinking about and ways in which to incorporate archives from those particular histories, spending some time out there abroad and working with communities. And a lot of times what we'll find is in the US, and this is true in the 1960s and 70s, when I've seen from archives, particularly around the Black Panther newspapers, is there's like a ripple effect in which the things that happen, and especially with Black Americans in the US here, it provides almost permission in other parts of the world for people to, it's like it becomes this sort of iconic movement that starts to create a ripple effect for other Black folks throughout the diaspora. When they're thinking about their own issues, I'm thinking particularly about Ethiopians in Israel, for example, who've used Black Lives Matter movement as a way to sort of like a scaffolding to talk about police brutality, et cetera, as Black people in Israel, for example, or just many other types of issues. So I'm interested in that conversation. Obviously, as somebody who's embodied, identified in a particular way, as an American-born person of Ethiopian descent, I try to be very mindful about my otherness in context, especially in international context, even if I am to go to Ethiopia and make work about what's happening politically there. I have such outsider knowledge because I am not living there that I want to approach these things with grace. So there's always that sort of identity politics that I try to play out.
Certainly. And also, I wasn't necessarily suggesting that you should do a project in Ethiopia. I just meant a general, more global set of responses. Jordan, how is the U.S. How is the U.S. Department of Arts and Culture mobilizing during this current election cycle?
Oh, okay. Let me answer this as quickly as physically possible because I could go on and on, as you know. So a few different things. One is we are building a massive network of grassroots cultural organizers all across the country. We've been working on legislation, I don't know, for almost a year now, I guess, at the federal level that would allow for new grant funding specifically to grassroots cultural organizing projects, to open up pathways for folks to get that direct support from the federal government. But more than anything, what we've been doing is really working in election defense, partnering with the Highlander Institute for specific election defense trainings that we've been holding for the past maybe 5-6 months, specifically training organizers on a regional basis to understand the specific laws that govern their elections and be able to get them the tactical knowledge they need to do that election day support work. But then also, more than anything, is keeping lines of communication open. So we try our best to connect folks across place. And if folks are interested, I will put a link in the chat. It's just usdac.us. You can email us anytime, reach out to me directly. But the other thing too that I'm doing, is you mentioned, is I oversee Providence's elections office. I'm very lucky to serve on the board of canvassers here and have a direct hand in election defense work on the ground, making sure that the elections are safe and efficient and all that good stuff. Making sure that our poll worker pool is supporting folks from the grassroots. But all of it is like, our election is in 3 days here in Rhode Island. And so the same weekend that I'm doing that election work, I'm having this conversation. I'm thinking about creative futures for folks to plug into. We know that voting is not the revolution. We know that it's not the salvation, but man, it is like the easiest thing you can do to have an immediate impact in your localized community, right? It doesn't have to be a love letter and prove that you are like obsessed with the candidate. It's choosing your target. It's choosing the atmosphere in which you want to organize. It's choosing the municipality and the state and the federal government that you want to push up against. And so for me, it's always carrying that message that it's about choosing how you want to build your community within that space. So if anyone's interested, I will put that link in the chat. Feel free to reach out anytime.
Thank you. And we do have one last question for Attila. And this is sort of broad, but I think this is something that you probably think about all the time. Where would you like to see the future of Trinidad Carnival go? And this could also be a question of where you even see the diaspora carnivals, because of course there's New York, there's London, there's Miami, etc., and LA now as well. There's so many different iterations of it at this stage. I wonder if you have thought about that.
I'm always thinking about that. Especially, you know, I don't know if you saw that discussion that happened last week about, I don't want to bring it up, but I have to talk about it. About Lala wearing this costume, which was then called, you know, oh, she's appropriating Caribbean. I mean, give me a look, I'm not trying to cuss, but the reality of the situation is this is not our masquerade tradition. It is an import, and it is something that has been commodified, right? And the people who make the most money from having these diaspora carnivals, you know, they make the money from the fact that, you know, this is what is marketed. You know, I was in a whole conversation earlier about marketability, and, you know, this whole question of Blackness not being marketable, right? And, you know, as a society that is so deeply embedded in colorism, you know, we have to have a light-skinned, you know, racially ambiguous young woman as the face of Carnival. And now maybe a little bit more, you're starting to see some traditional masquerade characters coming in. But the traditional masquerade characters that are coming in come out of the African masking tradition. And those traditions are not seen, we don't even want to, you know, as a Calypsonian, Hollis Liverpool Chopler says, they don't see Africa at all. Baby black. And they're talking about how the child of a Scottish ancestor, which might be true, but you're not seeing the Scottish ancestor, you're seeing all the African ancestors in the child face. And it's the same thing with the carnival. The carnival is unapologetically African, from the Juve to the steel band. And there is no space for that articulation in the conversation. And so what I see, or what I want to see in the internationalization of the carnival is an articulation of the idea that carnival is a space of Black joy, right? And you know, that expression of joy at freedom, because that is what Juve comes from. Juve began as a celebration of emancipation, and it was moved from Emancipation Day by the colonial authorities because it was too much of a threat to the society. And so you move it to the Christian Carnival, and then that way, then you start saying, oh, well, you know, it's descended from the French. With nothing no go so. It come out of the belly of reparation, dreaming, pulling yourself back together from the fragments that you were left with. It was the Yoruba people who came at the end after emancipation as bonded laborers, who came with their culture in a way so intact that they put a whole new layer of African pride and presence into the cultural expressions that were in the society. So yeah, so that's what I would like to see. I would like to see an articulation of carnival as a space of Black joy. And if it is shaped like that, you know, it's not just about this kind of frenzied, you know, whining for no reason. Whining is also part of our liberation. The fact that you could use your lower body to release inhibition. And the fact that, you know, my body is not shaped like a white woman's body. That is the reality of the situation. So you calling my body lascivious or obscene or savage, I have to take back the power of that, you know. And so the carnival is a space for liberation of Black bodies, celebration of Black joy, you know. And this is the reason why there were so many successive attempts to take away. And we see this now. We see it in Notting Hill. We see it in New York. We see it in those older established diaspora carnivals, where they are putting so much regulation that you can't actually enjoy it anymore. And so now Notting Hill has become a place for young white people to go and get drugs. And then they wonder why people are stabbing up each other. But if you have young white people trying to get drugs, then you have other young people who try to sell drugs. And if you encroaching on my territory, then I have a problem. So we're not looking really at what is causing certain things. So aside from the J'ouvert and the steel ban, you know, where else do we really get that sense of Black joy within the carnival space? Where? You know, it's not coming out in the mass anymore. We just have Vegas, and you know, I'm fed up with that.
Okay, well, this was final of our 3 conversations for Harnessing History. I'm so grateful to you, our audience, to our incredible panelists, Attila Springer, Helena Matafaria, Jordan Seabury, but of course in the previous conversations, Tamashi Jackson, Justin Donovan, Chief Ajua, of course, the first conversation, Alexi Peskin, Sadema Conan, Kenya Tyson, and of course, again, to you all for joining us. Thank you so much. And of course, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much.